I never believed a random collision could change everything. That morning, I sat in a Boys Town coffee shop, flipping through sketches for a new project, when someone crashed into my table and hot latte spilled all over my shirt. I looked up, ready to snap, but saw him, a guy with dark hair and a guilty smile, looking like he'd just run a marathon. My name's Ethan Davis. I'm 32 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I'm a graphic designer, used to hiding my feelings behind sarcastic jokes, especially after escaping my strict family in Indiana. Damn, sorry, I'm such a klutz, he said, grabbing napkins and trying to blot the stain on my shirt. His voice was deep, with a slight rasp, and I suddenly forgot I wanted to be mad. He introduced himself as Ryan and offered to buy me a new coffee, and instead of brushing him off, I agreed. We started talking while the barista made my order. Ryan was a financial analyst from Milwaukee, and his energy filled the space around us. He joked about his habit of running late, and I played along, sharing how I once dozed off in a meeting. I noticed how he looked at me, not just a glance, but something warm, with a hint of curiosity. It made my heart beat faster, and I quickly reminded myself not to get my hopes up. But when he laughed at my quip about Chicago weather, I felt my walls start to crack. We sat for nearly an hour, even though I had a deadline and he had a client meeting. When it was time to go, he grabbed a napkin, scribbled his number, and slid it to me, saying, "In case you want another coffee. Or just to chat." I stared at that napkin until he disappeared through the door, feeling an odd warmth in my chest. It was just a fluke, but it felt like it meant more. Back at my apartment, I set the napkin on the table and reread the number, like it might vanish. That evening, I texted him a short message, trying to sound casual, though my fingers shook. His reply came in a minute, "Glad you didn't toss the napkin. How about dinner Friday?" Lying in the dark, I thought about his smile and how dangerous it was to let myself hope. It's just a number on a napkin, right? Or is there something more behind this meeting? I never thought I'd agree to dinner with a near stranger. After that coffee shop encounter, I spent days replaying Ryan's smile and his scribbled number on that napkin. Texting him was easy, but going further felt terrifying. On Friday evening, I stood before the mirror in my Chicago apartment, convincing myself it was just dinner, nothing serious. But my heart pounded like I was heading to a first date, though I wasn't even sure if it was a date. I picked a navy shirt, hoping I looked casual enough, and headed to a bar in Boys Town I loved for its cozy tables and music that wasn't too loud. Ryan was already waiting outside, leaning against the wall with that same confident smile. He wore a black jacket, his hair slightly mussed by the wind, making him even more striking. "You showed up, I almost bet you'd bail," he said, holding the door open. His voice was warm, with a teasing edge, and I felt the tension in my shoulders ease a bit. We grabbed a table by the window, and soon the conversation flowed as effortlessly as it had in the coffee shop. He shared stories about his job as an analyst, how he loathed morning meetings, and I told him about a client who demanded more blue in a design without explaining what that meant. I tried not to stare at him too long, but it was hard. His eyes caught the light from the lamps, and every time he laughed, warmth spread through my chest. We talked about favorite spots in Chicago, how he loved deep dish pizza, and I admitted I preferred walks by Lake Michigan. But whenever the conversation veered toward anything personal, family, past, we both skirted around it. I noticed him hesitate when I asked about moving from Milwaukee and quickly changed the subject, not wanting to push. I wasn't ready to talk about my family either, about how they expect a life I don't want. When we left the bar, the night was cool, and Boys Town streets buzzed with laughter and music. Ryan suggested walking, and we strolled slowly toward my street. His shoulder brushed mine, and my breath quickened at the fleeting touch. "You always this quiet, or am I scaring you?" he asked, grinning. I laughed, saying I'm just used to listening, but inside, I wrestled with the urge to say more than I should. At my door, he paused, looking at me with something like anticipation. "This was great, Ethan. Wanna do it again?" I nodded, words catching in my throat. He walked away and I stood there, gripping the doorknob. Will we open up to each other more? Or will this night just be a nice fluke? After dinner with Ryan, I felt like I was teetering on an edge, One wrong move could shatter the fragile warmth growing between us. We kept texting, trading jokes and plans for another meetup, but I noticed how carefully he answered whenever I asked about anything personal. It made me wonder if I was rushing things too much. In Chicago, where skyscrapers blocked the sky and streets hummed with life, I grappled with what I wanted from Ryan and whether I was ready for it myself. One evening, we sat in his favorite bar in Boys Town, where neon signs reflected in the windows and jazz spilled from the speakers. Ryan was talking about a trip to Milwaukee, but when I asked why he left, his smile faltered. "Just needed a change," he said, eyes dropping to his beer. I felt a pang of curiosity but didn't push until he spoke again. "There was someone," he started quietly, staring at the table. "It ended badly. I don't want to make the same mistakes." His voice was steady, but pain seeped through, and he tried to hide it. I nodded, unsure what to say, but inside, something tightened at his vulnerability. Later, as we stepped outside, a cool breeze off Lake Michigan made me shiver. Ryan noticed and offered his jacket, but I waved it off, not wanting to seem weak. We walked in silence, and I thought about how his past echoed mine. That same evening my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice, as always, carried unspoken expectations. "Ethan, we're hoping you'll come to the family dinner next month. You know how important it is to be together." She hinted at my proper life, their dream of me with a wife and kids, and every word hit my nerves like a hammer. I lied, saying I'd think about it, and hung up, feeling my apartment walls close in around me. The next day, I told Ryan about the call while sitting on a park bench by the lake. He listened intently, his eyes tracking me as I spoke about my fear of disappointing my family. "My parents are easier," he said, "but I know what it's like when someone expects you to be someone you're not." His hand rested on the bench's backrest, so close to my shoulder I could feel the warmth of his fingers. It wasn't just a gesture, it held a support I hadn't expected. We sat, watching the water, and I realized I wanted to be closer to him, but fear still kept me at arm's length. How will our past wounds shape what's between us? Can we step toward each other despite them? After that park conversation with Ryan, something shifted between us, like an invisible wall started crumbling, but I was still terrified to take a step forward. His words about his past and my fear of my family hung in the air, and I didn't know how to move on. Chicago kept buzzing around us. Cars honked on Michigan Avenue, and pedestrians rushed by, but my world revolved around Ryan and what I couldn't bring myself to say. On Saturday evening, we decided to walk along Lake Michigan, where city lights reflected on the dark water, mimicking stars. Ryan suggested it that morning, texting, "Need some air, wanna join?" I agreed, though part of me wanted to cancel, scared I couldn't handle the growing pull toward him. He was waiting at the lakefront, in a light jacket, hands in pockets, his smile softer than usual. "You look like you're heading to a job interview," he teased, nodding at my neat shirt. I laughed, saying I was just trying not to look like a hobo, but his joke eased some of my nerves. We strolled along the shore, chatting about small things, the worst movies we'd seen, how he once got stuck in an elevator at work. But the talk soon turned heavier. Ryan stopped, staring at the water, and said, "That guy in Milwaukee, he made it hard for me to trust people." His voice was quiet, almost drowned by the wind, and I saw his fists clench in his pockets. I didn't know how to respond, but I felt I had to be honest. "My family wants me to be someone else," I started, gazing at the horizon. "They don't know who I really am, and I'm scared they'll never accept me." My words hung between us, and my throat tightened with fear that I'd said too much. Ryan turned to me, his eyes serious but warm. "You don't have to be who they want," he said, his voice firm, like he was saying it to himself too. We stood close, and when a gust pushed us nearer, his hand brushed mine. It was a fleeting touch, but it burned like a spark and my breath caught. I didn't pull away, and neither did he. His fingers lingered, light but deliberate, and in that moment, the world narrowed to just us. But then he stepped back, mumbling, "Sorry, didn't mean to rush." I shook my head, words failing me, but inside, I screamed that I wanted this more than I feared it. Can we push past the fear? What happens if we take the next step? After that lakeside walk, I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan, how his fingers brushed mine, how his gaze made my heart race. We kept texting, but now every message carried a subtle hint of something more, like we both knew we were on the brink of something big. Chicago sparkled with lights around us, but all I saw was his smile, stuck in my head. I wanted to be closer, but fear still clung to me, whispering that everything could fall apart. On Friday, we met at a Boys Town bar where live music drowned out the crowd's noise, and warm lamplight created a cozy glow. Ryan showed up a bit late, his hair slightly damp from the drizzling rain, looking like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. "Sorry I'm late, traffic was a nightmare," he said, sitting across from me and adjusting his shirt sleeve. I shrugged, joking that I was getting used to his tardiness, but inside, I was just happy to see him. We ordered beers, and the conversation flowed easily, but I noticed his leg brush mine under the table, and he didn't pull away. It was subtle, but that touch sent a wave of warmth through me. As the night went on, the bar grew livelier. Some guy at the counter, clearly drunk, tossed a rude comment our way, hinting we were sitting too close. I tensed, ready to leave, but Ryan leaned in and said loudly enough for the guy to hear, "If you don't like it, find another bar." His voice was calm but firm, and I felt my respect for him deepen. When we stepped outside, the rain had stopped, and the air was crisp. "You okay?" he asked, looking at me with concern. I nodded, but inside, I was shaking with a mix of anger and gratitude. We walked to my apartment, and without thinking, I invited him in for coffee. Inside, it was quiet, just the clock ticking on the wall. We stood in the living room, and I suddenly realized how close he was. His eyes searched mine, holding something that made my breathing uneven. "Ethan, I don't want to mess this up," he said softly, but his hand rose, resting on my shoulder. I stepped closer, and our lips met, gentle, cautious, but so powerful it felt like the world dissolved. His fingers slid to my neck, each movement warm, like he wanted to memorize this moment. But then he pulled back, his breathing heavy. "Sorry, I'm scared this is too fast," he mumbled, staring at the floor. I touched his arm, saying it was okay, but inside, I was burning. Will this fear break our connection? Or is this just the start of something bigger? After that night in my apartment, when Ryan's lips met mine, I felt like the world expanded and shrank to his breath all at once. But his sudden pullback, his words about fearing he'd mess things up, left me reeling. We said goodbye awkwardly, and I was alone, staring at the coffee mug he hadn't finished. Chicago kept humming outside, but I couldn't shake the warmth of his fingers on my neck or the fear in his eyes. The next day, I woke with a heaviness in my chest. Ryan hadn't texted, and I didn't know if I should reach out. I worried he regretted our kiss, that I'd pushed too hard, even though he'd made the first move. All day at the office, I flipped through sketches distractedly until a colleague asked why I looked like I'd lost something important. I brushed it off with a joke, but her words hit deep. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore and texted Ryan, "You okay?" I didn't want last night to be weird. I reread the message 10 times before sending, then checked my phone every minute, waiting. When he finally replied, "I'm fine, just need time. Can we meet tomorrow?" I exhaled, but the doubts lingered. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near my place, where the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the hum of chatter. Ryan was there first, sitting by the window, staring outside thoughtfully. His hair was slightly messy, and his eyes held the same vulnerability I'd seen that night. "Sorry about yesterday," he started as soon as I sat down. "I didn't want you to think I regretted it." His voice was soft, and he looked at me like he was scared I'd walk away. I said I was confused too, unsure how far we could go. We spoke quietly, like we were afraid to break the moment, and I felt my heart open with every word he said. When we left the coffee shop, it was dark, and Boys Town's streets glowed with lights. Ryan suggested walking to my place, and we moved slowly, closer than usual. At my door, he paused, and I saw his hand tremble before he touched mine. His fingers were warm, and he held my hand like it was a promise. "I don't want to run from this, Ethan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stepped closer, feeling his warmth wrap around me, our foreheads nearly touching. It wasn't a kiss, but the moment was so intimate I could feel his breath on my skin. We stood there, silent, until he smiled, gently squeezing my hand. Will we find the strength to be honest? Or will this closeness scare us again? After that night at my door, when Ryan held my hand, I felt we'd crossed an invisible line. His words about not wanting to run echoed in my head like a promise, and I caught myself smiling just thinking about him. Chicago was as loud as ever, with honking cars and crowded streets, but my world narrowed to the warmth of his gaze and how he made me feel truly seen. The next Saturday, Ryan suggested spending the evening at his place. Nothing fancy, just dinner and maybe a movie, he texted, and I agreed, though my insides fluttered with anticipation. His Lakeview apartment was small but cozy, with bookshelves and soft light from a corner lamp. When I walked in, he was fussing in the kitchen, trying to chop vegetables for a salad, looking so focused I couldn't help but tease, "You sure you won't cut a finger before dinner?" He laughed, tossing a dish towel at me, and it melted my nerves. We ate pasta on the couch, chatting about work, how he hated his office coffee maker, and I shared about a client who wanted retro but modern. But the conversation slowly deepened. "I really freaked out that night," he said, setting his plate down. "But I want to try Ethan. With you. Honestly." His eyes were so open I felt my own walls crumble. I admitted I was scared too but didn't want to back away, and he smiled like that was all he needed to hear. After dinner, we stayed on the couch and he put on some old movie, but neither of us watched. Ryan shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine, and I felt the heat of his body through his thin shirt. "Is this okay?" he asked softly, lifting his hand, and I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingers gently grazed my cheek, and I closed my eyes, sinking into the sensation. He leaned in, and our lips met again, slow, tender, like we were rediscovering each other. His hands slid to the back of my neck, each movement careful, as if he was saying more than words could. We pulled apart but stayed close, his forehead against mine, his breath warm and steady. It was a moment of pure trust, where words weren't needed, and silence spoke for us. We spent the evening like that, tangled in that warm cocoon, trading soft touches and quiet laughs. When I left, he walked me to the door, his hand lingering on mine. "This felt right," he said, and I nodded, my heart pounding with hope. Can we hold on to this tenderness? Or will life complicate things again? I never thought a family interrogation could turn into a comedy of errors. After that warm night at Ryan's, I was floating, like we'd finally found a rhythm that was ours alone. His touches, his soft laugh, they still echoed in me, and I even started humming in the mornings, which, for a perpetually grumpy designer, was practically a crime. But Chicago, with its hustle and unpredictability, decided I shouldn't get too comfortable. Life threw me a curveball in the form of my parents, who showed up in town unannounced, and gossip at Ryan's workplace that, as it turned out, could rattle our fragile harmony. It started with a text from Mom, "We're in Chicago for the weekend, expecting you for dinner." I nearly dropped my phone, knowing their dinner was code for a full-blown inquisition about my life. They were staying at a downtown hotel, and I, grudgingly, agreed to come. That evening, I sat across from them in a restaurant overlooking the river, where waiters bustled with trays, and my parents, like two detectives, launched their investigation. "Ethan, who's this new friend you mentioned?" Mom asked, pursing her lips like "friend" was shorthand for something shady. Dad chimed in, "Hope he's not one of those types dragging you into trouble." I rolled my eyes, saying Ryan was just a colleague, though inside, I was fuming at their insinuations. I joked they watched too many crime shows, but their looks told me they weren't buying it. Meanwhile, Ryan hit his own snag. He told me later, sitting in my favorite Boys Town bar, where the air smelled of hops and old rock played. One of his colleagues, a gossip hound, spotted us together at a coffee shop and started spreading rumors at work. "Now half the office thinks I'm planning my love life instead of crunching numbers," he said, rubbing his temples, though his smile was more annoyed than defeated. I suggested we put on a show for the gossipers, like me showing up at his office in a loud Hawaiian shirt, announcing we're off to Maui. He burst out laughing, and his laugh was so infectious I couldn't help grabbing his hand across the table. It was a small gesture, but it made us both pause because we knew how it looked to others. When I got home, I got a text from Ryan, "Your parents are something else. My coworkers are a circus. We got this." I replied we definitely weren't giving up, but his question made me think. That night, I fell asleep smiling, picturing me and Ryan laughing off all these rumors and interrogations. But what if the pressure gets heavier? Can we keep laughing when the world starts pushing harder? After all the gossip and parental interrogations, I hoped Ryan and I had grown stronger, that our laughter and ease could weather any storm. But one evening changed everything, and I felt the ground slip from under me. Chicago, with its cold wind and gray streets, suddenly mirrored my mood, and I realized even the warmest moments could be at risk if fear took over. We were in his Lakeview apartment, where the smell of fresh coffee still lingered. Ryan looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes darker than usual, nervously tugging at his shirt's hem. "Ethan, we need to talk," he said, his voice so heavy I felt a chill in my chest. He stared at the floor, avoiding my eyes, and went on, "All this gossip at work, people's stares. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of pressure." His words hit like a punch, and my heart tightened. "Are you saying we're too complicated?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it trembled with emotion. Ryan finally looked at me, his eyes a mix of guilt and pain. "I don't want to lose you, but maybe we need a pause," he said softly. That word, pause, echoed in me, and I felt something inside break. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and left, leaving him standing in the doorway. Outside, the wind stung my face, but I barely noticed, lost in my thoughts. I thought about every moment we'd shared, his laugh, the warmth of his hands, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. And now it all felt so fragile. I couldn't stay in Chicago, where every street reminded me of him, so I went to a friend's place in Milwaukee for the weekend. Sitting in his living room, I tried to distract myself, but thoughts of Ryan wouldn't let go. I was angry at him for giving up, but angrier at myself for not fighting. On Sunday evening, I got a letter, handwritten, delivered by courier. It was from Ryan. "Ethan, I screwed up," it began. "I got scared, but not of you. I love you, and I need you to know that." His words were so raw I felt tears burn my eyes. He wrote about his fear, how he wanted to be better for us, and I realized I still wanted to be with him. I came back to Chicago, but my heart pounded with uncertainty. Will he come back to me for real? Or is this letter just another moment we won't hold on to? I never thought one letter could restore my faith in us. After Ryan's confession of love, I drove back to Chicago, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. His words were so raw, but I couldn't shake the doubt. What if we back away again, if the world's pressure proves too strong? Chicago greeted me with a cold wind off Lake Michigan, and I felt like I was standing on a cliff, deciding whether to jump or step back. I knew I had to see Ryan, but I was terrified his words would stay just words. We agreed to meet at the same Boys Town coffee shop where it all started, where he spilled coffee on me and left his number on a napkin. When I walked in, he was already there, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. His eyes, usually so confident, were filled with worry, and it made my heart ache. "Ethan, I'm so sorry," he started as soon as I sat, his voice shaking with emotion. He spoke quickly, like he was afraid I'd leave, explaining how workplace gossip and his own fear nearly ruined everything. "I don't want to pause. I want you," he said, and his hand reached for mine across the table but stopped halfway, waiting for my permission. I looked at him, feeling anger, hurt, and love collide inside me. "You hurt me, Ryan," I said quietly, trying not to let my voice break. "But I don't want to lose this either." My words hung in the air, and I saw his shoulders relax, hope flickering in his eyes. We talked for a long time, unpacking everything that happened, and I felt the truth between us become a bridge, not a wall. He promised to be honest, even when it's scary, and I promised the same. When we left the coffee shop, Boys Town glowed with lights, and I realized I didn't want the night to end. We walked to Lake Michigan, where waves lapped gently at the shore and city lights danced on the water. Ryan stopped and took my hand, his fingers warm and steady. "We'll take it slow, okay? But together," he said, and I nodded, feeling tears sting my eyes. I stepped closer, and he wrapped me in a hug, his warmth enveloping me like a blanket, and in that moment, I knew we'd be okay. We stood there, holding each other under the stars, and I felt the pain of the past days melt away, replaced by joy. Hey viewers, what would you do if someone you loved suggested a break? Would you forgive them if they came back with an apology? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know what you think. Our story with Ryan is just beginning, and I don't know what lies ahead, but for the first time in a while, I believe we'll make it. What's next for us? And how far can we go if we hold on to each other?